minerals are a missing link for you. I know that is a super bold claim, but I promise you by the end of the video, you are going to be as obsessed with minerals as I am. Why? Because minerals are sparking every reaction in the body. They are important for creating energy for every single system in the body. When we're focusing on recovering from birth, focusing on our fertility, and hopefully having more kids, or just in general helping to balance our hormones and feel nourished. You are going to want to save this video, watch it a few times, maybe even take out a notebook to take some notes. We are going to be talking about the what of minerals, the why they're so important, how to know if yours are out of balance, and stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm going to be going over my favorite recipes for my mineral-rich drinks that I like to include every single day and are an easy way to make sure that you are helping replenish and balance your minerals on a day-to-day basis. Let's get started. Minerals. What is the big deal with them? Why are they so important? Like, what's the big deal? They are kicking off reactions all the time, constantly, without us even knowing it. And so when those minerals are out of balance, they're either low in general, like we don't have enough of them, or, as you'll come to learn, the ratios of them to each other are very important. When that is out of balance, you start to see top tier issues of those systems failing in the body. So things that we come to know as hormonal symptoms, whether that be thyroid dysfunction, unstable weight or hair loss or skin issues or blood sugar issues or things like postpartum depression or anxiety. The hormones are like the what is happening, right? What's going on, but the minerals are the why it's happening. Another reason why I'm so obsessed with them is because we cannot make them. We can make certain vitamins. We cannot make minerals, which means that you have to get them from food and you have to get them in proper amounts and from bioavailable sources in order to use them. So think about how much our body needs them and the fact that we can't make them. If we're not intentional about getting them in, we might be having problems. Combine that with the fact that we are in the most mineral depleted state we have ever been in the history of ever. Minerals are depleted first and foremost in any kind of stressor. I'm even talking positive stressors like pregnancy, that is a stressor on the body, or breastfeeding. Did you know that when you are pregnant, you donate about 9 to 10% or 4 pounds of your minerals to your baby every single pregnancy? Not to mention you're actually giving additional minerals while you're breastfeeding to support that cute little munchkin growing so strong and so fast. We are giving out minerals as moms in abundant amounts. Any kind of stress response in the body requires minerals. We're using a lot of minerals when our body requires a lot of energy. And so think about anything you do, negative stressor or positive stressor, we're using minerals at high abundant amounts. But our food is the most depleted that it has ever been because of modern farming practices. So things like spraying and tilling, our food has a lot less levels of minerals than it's ever had. Not to mention a lot of us are using water filters, which is great to filter out things like chlorine or fluoride, but we're also filtering out everything and having what's called like empty water, or some people call it hungry water, and we're not oftentimes adding trace minerals back in. Another common practice that is very draining of our minerals is a lot of medication. Even things like birth control being one of the most common ones. Birth control is extremely depleting on a lot of minerals in the body. This is not to say that medications are bad, but they are draining on our mineral store. So combine all those depleters with the fact that we're not intentionally replenishing, and a lot of us don't know what that looks like, you end up with a very mineral depleted mama population. So you have got 4 macro minerals, meaning the largest because you need them in the largest amounts. And then you have other micro minerals. So your 4 macro minerals are sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And then you have micro minerals, things like zinc, phosphorus, copper, iron, manganese, cobalt, boron, things like that. I'm going to be really focusing on, for the majority of the time, the macro minerals, because when you are balancing your macro minerals and when you're focusing on your macro minerals, it actually will influence your micro minerals. And so if you're focusing on your macro, a lot of the micro minerals will actually fall into place. Magnesium. Why do we need magnesium? It is literally the first thing to be drained in any kind of stress response. And so we're using it in very copious amounts. We're using it a lot when you nurse, when you're breastfeeding, when you're up all night taking care of a baby. You use it a lot in pregnancy. If you've ever experienced symptoms in pregnancy like restless leg, a lot of muscle aches, magnesium is somewhere that you're going to want to look. It's also an important cofactor for vitamins, something like vitamin D. So if you've ever had low vitamin D or issues, where you feel like you're out in the sun, but your vitamin D is super low, remember that nothing in the body works alone. And so our body needs copious amounts of magnesium as well as retinol to be able to synthesize that vitamin D and use it. When we don't have enough magnesium, it can look like an issue with muscle soreness and lactic acid buildup. It looks like thyroid dysfunction and can look like depression or anxiety and a lot of digestive distress and blood sugar issues. Sources that you can focus on to replenish your magnesium is actually somewhat hard to do because our soil has become super depleted. It's one of the few minerals that I think everyone tends to do well supplementing on. There are food sources, so you can focus on things like avocados, and there's trace amounts in cacao. Cooked leafy greens has some magnesium, bone broth, and some dairy, but again, those are kind of trace amounts. So you focus on those foods, but also supplementing. If you're new to supplementation at all, you're always going to want to talk to your midwife, your care provider. But I find that the topical magnesium, like magnesium chloride, I love the Ancient Minerals brand. I'll link the one that I use down below, but that's a super gentle way to start magnesium. You don't want to be going haywire, supplementing with things and thinking, oh, I'm low in magnesium, I'll just find a magnesium supplement at the store and just. So starting with something slow like a topical and then trying to start with food sources as you build up your other mineral stores is going to be really important. Calcium. I love calcium. Calcium works with phosphorus, which is a micromineral, to help balance our nervous system. And it also works with potassium for our thyroid health. When it is out of balance, it can look like an out of balance nervous system. So it can either be like you're constantly in the fight or flight state where you're always on edge. You have a lot of anxiety, maybe loose stools, trouble sleeping, hair loss, things like that. Or the opposite, where you struggle with constipation and you feel really sluggish and tired and you have dry skin, or maybe you're struggling with skin issues. Out of balance can also look like things like kidney stones and even allergies. My favorite food sources is dairy. I love me a glass of raw milk or some kefir or something like that. But bone broth can also be a source of a non-dairy source of calcium. There's some amounts in cooked leafy greens, as well as like things like pearl powder or eggshell powder. Sodium. Okay, sodium and potassium. When you think of sodium and potassium, I want you to think of those twins. Maybe they were at school. They were all together. Everyone liked them, right? They're always best friends. They're really connected, but you can still tell them apart, right? So you know which one is which, but they're always together. That's sodium and potassium, okay? They keep each other where they are. We need potassium inside the cell. We need sodium outside the cell. Sodium is super, super important. Do not be afraid of salt, okay? It is super important for balancing our fluids. So if you struggled with a lot of water retention in pregnancy, I know everyone's very afraid of salt, but having enough is really important so that you can balance those fluids, blood pressure, as well as blood sugar, and as well as stomach acid production. Salt is really important for producing enough stomach acid. So if you've had a history of digestive issues or not feeling like you're digesting your food, or SIBO or candida overgrowth or things like that, salt is needed to produce that stomach acid, which is our body's defense against all of those critters that like to overgrow. It's also so important for our thyroid because it transports iodine. It transports it to the cell. So if you've struggled with thyroid issues, thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, things like that, salt is very important. Potassium. Potassium has become my new favorite mineral. I have come to learn that potassium is one of those ones that I find is just really deficient in a lot of people, particularly moms. Focusing on your potassium is one of the first things you can do to make sure that you're supporting your minerals. Potassium is huge for blood sugar and thyroid. It's amazing for insulin resistance or any kind of PCOS issues or diabetes issues. Having enough potassium means that your cells are sensitive to the glucose and can actually use the glucose for energy. It helps take the glucose inside the cell. It also does the same thing for thyroid hormone. So it's one thing that your body's making that thyroid hormone, but is your body using that thyroid hormone? So if you're having thyroid issues or you're having symptoms of thyroid issues, whether it's hair loss, skin issues, unexplained weight gain, sluggishness, fatigue, anxiety, depression, constipation, or trouble sleeping, things like that, it may not come up on your lab work because your body's making that thyroid hormone, but your mineral levels are responsible for using that thyroid hormone in the body. Food sources, when it comes to potassium, think whole food carbs. So fruits and roots, those are going to be your main sources of potassium. So like starchy vegetables, whether it be white potatoes, those are packed with potassium, or squash, fruit, coconut water is very rich in potassium. You might be catching on that these are a lot of the foods I have mentioned in my Nourishing Foundations diet video. oh my gosh, okay, I gotta get on this. Like, how do I know if my minerals are out of balance? Good question. Can you check yes to any one of these? Have you been pregnant in the last couple years? Have you been breastfeeding or nursing anytime recently? Have you gone through a stressful life event or change or schooling or job change or anything like that? Lastly, do you relate to having any kind of hormonal issues like trouble sleeping, hair loss, skin issues, postpartum anxiety or depression, digestive issues, whether that's constipation or the opposite of constipation, you're running to the bathroom all the time, blood sugar issues, whether that be low blood sugar or consistently high blood sugar, or like you're on a blood sugar wave all the time, painful periods, blood clotting, like all of these things. Can you relate to any of this? If so, your minerals are probably needing some help. You can get something called a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and you like the idea of testing. I will link below to resources for you if you want to go that route, but I actually don't recommend it if you're new to this and you're hearing this for the first time. Why? Because no matter what your levels are, you're gonna have to start in the same place. So please don't think that you have to get tested or you have to know your levels in order to balance your minerals, because you don't yet. I would start with the foundations and I would really focus on the mineral rich drinks that I talk about at the end of the video, and slowly incorporating them in your everyday and see how you feel. How to replenish. All right, we always want to have a food first approach when it comes to anything. Why? Because in food, you will find the minerals naturally occurring with other synergistic cofactors. So a perfect example of this is beef liver. Beef liver is rich in copper. Copper is an amazing king micro mineral, but it also has retinol, and it also has B vitamins, and it also has some iron, because they all are involved with absorbing each other. You would be shocked at the effect that it makes in your hormones and in your overall feeling of wellness when you're focusing on a food first approach, especially for something like minerals. So taking a food first approach, what does this look like? It looks like including really mineral rich foods on a daily or weekly basis, things like organ meats, beef livers packed with copper and zinc, bee products, royal jelly, bee pollen, raw honey. Brewer's yeast is going to be packed with some potassium and micro minerals, as well as lots of B vitamins. We're going to be looking at shellfish. Shrimp contains high amounts of selenium, which is another micronutrient or micro mineral, and zinc and iodine. Whitefish is packed with iodine. All right. My favorite recipes. The OG adrenal cocktail. If you are online like at all, you know that this has gotten a lot of fame in the last 2 years, but it's actually not new at all. It was invented by a naturopath about like 8 or so years ago. And essentially what it is, it's a form of sodium and potassium with whole food vitamin C to support your adrenals. Sodium and potassium are your adrenal best friend, okay? And so is whole food vitamin C. And so basically it's a little elixir that you treat like a supplement, and you take it daily, once or twice a day, to help support your body's stress response. The OG recipe is half a cup of orange juice with 1/4 a teaspoon of cream of tartar and 1/4 a teaspoon of salt. But you can really play around with this. My favorite form of like an adrenal cocktail is actually my labor aid. It is half equal parts red raspberry leaf tea and coconut water with a helpful dosing of salt. In this recipe, I used 8 ounces of red raspberry leaf tea, 8 ounces of coconut water, and a little, like a heaping 1/4 a teaspoon of salt. I used some raw honey in it to sweeten it, and a hefty dose of lemon juice for my vitamin C, and boom, you have got amazing, replenishing, electrolyte-rich beverage that can help you power through labor. My next favorite one is bone broth. Bone broth is rich. It is a dairy-free source of calcium, but it's also going to contain a lot of those micronutrients from those bones. It is a warming beverage, and it is something that I find is so helpful, especially when you're pregnant, because it's going to contain that gelatin to help your skin stretch and to soothe digestion, which can become really irritated with all of the hormonal changes in pregnancy and postpartum. You can make bone broth on your own in the Instant Pot or in the slow cooker or on the stove. You really just throw bones in, cover them with water, and slow cook them for really as long as you want, anywhere between 12 to 48 hours. My next one is a glass of milk with some sea salt. This is basic, and it's something I can do with one hand. I just had my farm pickup this morning, so I've got a huge fresh batch of raw milk. I'm going to pour myself a glass and do a hefty pinch of sea salt. So if you can tolerate dairy, this is amazing. It's got the calcium, not to mention Milk has some trace amounts of potassium and magnesium, and that dash of salt is helpful for sodium and can be a really, really quick snack because it has protein, fat, and carbs. My next recipe that I adore is my mineral-rich lemonade. You can dissolve the honey in water first. So I took 2 tablespoons, it really depends on taste, but 1 to 2 tablespoons of raw honey, and I dissolved it in some hot water first. Then I added about a cup of the Interleaf aloe vera juice. Lakewood is my favorite brand. I'll link it below. And then a spritz of lemon and a good about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You can also do the orange juice and it makes kind of like a orange spritzer, if you will, but I like the tart feeling of the lemon. You can play around with these recipes, okay? You don't have to follow these, but play around with that. Maybe you really love coconut water, so you know that's a great source of potassium. Add some sea salt to that. Find a whole food source of vitamin C, maybe some grapefruit. I had some things come up in my pregnancy, including skin issues and blood sugar issues, and they did not start to get better until I really focused on my minerals. I hope this video opened your eyes to the magic of minerals. I am Jess of Nourishing New Mama, and I make new videos every week on all things intentional, holistic nourishment with your mama design in mind. I'll see you in the next video.